Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. Made in the image of God. It says that we are made in the likeness of God. And 3 times the word image is used. How often does God have to say something? Once should be enough. When God says something 3 times, he is trying to get our attention. We are made in the image of God. People debate what this means. Some people make a big deal out of how we treat our appearance, our natural appearance, because of how it indicates whether we accept or reject being made in the image of God. I tend to agree with these people, but I would not debate that issue. But I like my beard. But there is a more important issue. When Jesus was settling the question of authority here on earth, authority that we live under, back in the passage that you can hear about in other lessons, Luke chapter 20, verse 25, and the surrounding verses, people come to Jesus to test him about the authority of government. The question is immediately about taxes, but it's broadly about all authority. What is the authority of a government, particularly a government imposed on the people against their will? And Jesus asks them to show him a coin, commonly in use, one they needed for their everyday commerce. And they show the coin. He says, "Whose image is on it?" Well, it's Augustus Caesar. So Caesar's image is on it. Whose name is on it? Oh, Augustus Caesar. Caesar's name is on it, and his image. His image. And Jesus says, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar's." And then he adds that most important and most neglected final words. "And to God the things that are God's." How did he distinguish what was Caesar's? What had Caesar's image on it? So then, what is he saying to us about what we owe to God? What things belong to God? What area of life belongs to God? These were educated men, educated in the scriptures. They would know exactly what he's talking about. And we miss that. We miss that. Because as soon as he said, "Whose image is on it?" and then said, "Render to God who is God's," they would immediately know that he is referring to this passage in Bereshit, in Genesis, which is about the creation, the first days, the creation week, in which God created man in his image. So what are the things that we render to God? It's not talking about some little 10% money thing. That money is not in God's image. It is commanded, but it's not in God's image. So that's not what he's talking about. He is talking about our whole life obligation to God. Ourselves. Those things that have to do with our personhood and our relation to God. Jesus talked about this so much, our relationship to God. And so did Paul. Paul talks about offering our bodies as a living sacrifice. There's a place where it says that God appointed that all of the nations, the ethnic groups of the world, should each live in their geographically and culturally and politically appointed place that God had mapped out in order that they might seek God. And Jesus says, what is the work to do the work of God? It is to believe on him who has been sent. So we have these discussions of our obligation to God, and this supersedes any obligation we have to the government. So we have the obligation to spread the gospel. Now, I am spreading this gospel lesson by the internet. The internet didn't exist in the book of Genesis, didn't exist for all those thousands of years. And as such, it is part of a later arrangement of things, around a later cosmos, the later world, the world we live in. And being invented by the U.S. government, handed over to some world governing bodies, they have the authority to regulate it as they see fit. And they do. But the personal obligation for me to teach the gospel, to teach God's word, supersedes that. And other obligations that we have, which have to do directly with our personhood and our relationship with God, God has never handed that authority over to Kaiser, to Caesar. Never. It is an obligation that we have directly to God that dates from the day that God created us in his image.